Hi everyone, I'm Jack Fremling, Raconteur, and I hope that you're doing well. I'd like to share some thoughts on Ruined by Lynn Nottage. This is an absolute masterpiece. It was a Pulitzer Prize winner about a decade ago, and it's not only a play that I think is, the finest work Lynn Nottage has produced, it's really quite possibly the best single drama written by someone in the US in the past generation. It's that strong of a play. And it's a play that, of course, showcases all of Lynn Nottage's talents as a playwright, but it also shows how she's one of those dramatists who's building on the foundation laid by the great realists such as Chekhov or Ibsen. And so please read it if you have not. If you've never heard of her, check out any of her works. But this and Sweat are certainly her two strongest. So within Ruined, Nottage, as usual, is focusing on characters who are populating the margins of society. We often hear that phrase, the fabric of society. Well, these characters are people who are sort of the loose threads on that fabric. People in power, people in privilege would be more than happy to just cut those threads off, clean up the fabric, as you will. But Nottage wants to find out who these people are. She wants to give them voice, to find out, what are they doing here in the present? What has shaped their past and led them to this point? And through that, she begins to examine society, just as Ibsen was a master at taking this interior drama and then using that to explore the layers around not just that character or that community, but society as a whole. Nottage is doing the exact same thing, and she does it with real verve. Her characters have a real personality. They also have real hopes, and that I think is the other hallmark of a Lynn Nottage play, is it's not just characters who are enduring and persevering through trauma, and who have been brought through, laid low from the circumstances, but are just continuing to trudge forward. She really finds a way to give these characters hope, to identify that there are real people experiencing this, and those are real people with real hopes, with real desires. So what makes them keep going? Where do they want to go? What do they want to happen tomorrow? And that gives a very different tone to what's happening in any of her plays. So Ruined, if you've never read it, go ahead, try to find it at your library, find it at a university library. It'll take you about 2 hours to read it. It's a fantastic play. But Ruined is set now at a tavern in the Democratic Republic of the Congo as a civil war is starting to break out. So it takes place across a period of a couple of months. And as the play goes on, it becomes clear that the violence is escalating in the area where this tavern is. And it's run by this wonderful character, Mama Nadi. And she is a character who has, sort of seen it all, found a way to survive through all of it. And where it's never quite clear, what is it she wants? Does she want to just continue eking out this existence she's leading on page 1 of the play? Or does she have a real hope to leave this life behind, to leave, and go to the city? Or even to leave the country, leave the continent of Africa? What is it she wants to do? And we start to get a glimpse of what that life could be. But we're more focused on who she is as this almost otherworldly character who's certainly the biggest personality within the town, but also someone who's just a magnet for other characters. They draw life almost from the life she seems to have maintained across her existence. But she has a clear eye for what's going on. So when another character, Mr. Harari, is sort of, dealing with her and talking business and such, she goes, "You sound like old Papa. He was like you, Mr. Harari. Worked too much, always want more, no rest. When there was famine, his bananas were rotten. He used to say, as long as the forest grows, a man will never starve." And so Mr. Harari replies, "Well, does he still have his farm?" Smiling to herself. "You know better, Mr. Harari. You're in the Congo. Things slip from our fingers like butter. No. When I was 11, this white man with skin the color of wild berries turned up with a piece of paper. It'd say you have rights to my family land. Just like that, taken. And you want to hear a joke? Poor old Papa bought magic from a friend. He thought a handful of powder would give him back his land." And she holds up a diamond. "Everyone talk diamonds, but I want a powerful slip of paper that says I can cut down forests and dig holes and build to the moon if I choose. I don't want someone to turn up at my door and take my life from me, not ever again. But tell me, how does a woman like me get a piece of land?" And so she has a very real perception of the world she inhabits, her place within it, the place society has created for her, and the place she's creating for herself, and that dynamic. And so Mama Nadi is this fascinating character across the place. She seems very hard at times, She seems willing to cut anybody if it'll make sure that she manages to get ahead and maintain the small amount of power she's been able to cultivate for herself. And yet there's this warmth and humanity to her. We start to see that she is willing to perhaps, help someone else out, that she is willing to give someone a helping hand. And that three-dimensional nature to her character is really quite wonderful. And particularly to see that in the world that these characters inhabit. And so that tavern, of course, is not just a tavern, and Mama Nottie is not just running this bar, it's a brothel. And so we also get a window into the characters who inhabit this brothel, these young women, and what has happened to them. So we're then introduced at the very beginning to two young women who have really been through the absolute hell of this civil war. And it's not just the violence they've experienced and the violence they've seen in their communities, it's the sexual violence as well. And so that's quite explicit across this play. But it's used to explore how these characters continue to, as I said, persevere, but who they want to now be, having passed through that experience of violence. And so we have two characters, Sophie and Salima. And Sophie has been mutilated. So despite having an education, despite having been someone who was closer to assimilating to what would be, viewed as like the right level of society by so many individuals in Europe who are, of course, involved in the oppression that occurred across not just the Democratic Republic of Congo, but all of Africa for generations. And are complicit in that. She's someone who has seemed to be assimilated towards what is viewed as the right level of society, and yet she, in a moment, the violence has attacked her. It has, led to her life utterly being turned upside down. And so her role within the brothel is she's helping clean up. She helps, act as sort of a waitress within it. She helps keep the books because she's educated, and that's contrasted with Salima, who arrives at the same time. And Mama Nottie being willing to allow Sophie to be there, even though she can't perhaps make money the way the other girls can, is a sign of that three-dimensional humanity I had mentioned. But Salima is interesting because she was married. So we have one character who was educated, we have one character who was married, and both of them have had their lives turned upside down. And now they're here in this same place with Mama Nottie. And so Salima becomes interesting in part because she is someone whose body is viewed as plunder by, not just the customers and patrons who are showing up at the tavern, but also the soldiers, both the government soldiers and the rebel soldiers. And that gives her a very different character across the play. So at one point, Sophie's talking about how she's afraid and she doesn't want to be, here, that she's terrified. But Salima notes, you don't have to be with them. Sometimes their hands are so full of rage that it hurts to be touched. This night I look over at you singing, and you seem almost happy, like a sunbird that can fly away if you reach out to touch it. And Sophie replies, is that what you think? While I'm singing, I'm praying the pain will be gone. But what those men did to me lives inside of my body. Every step I take, I feel them in me, punishing me. And it will be that way for the rest of my life. And it's then that Salima tells Sophie that she's pregnant. And Sophie can never really be pregnant now. And so there's this new layer of interaction between them. And again, this new sense of a third generation now involved in and affected by this civil war and the violence that's going on, and specifically the violence towards these women. The title of the play, Ruined, refers to women who have been assaulted and specifically women who have been mutilated, but it also acts as a metaphor for the entire land, a land that has been viewed as plunder by many, and now the people in that land who are also viewed as plunder. And so those two characters really lend a new heart and another side, another dimension to the play from Nottage. And we have this incredible moment where it turns out that Mama has that diamond, but she also has been saving money. And she catches Sophie having been taking some of the money, and she demands to know why. And she goes, tell me what you're planning to do with my money, because it's my money. I what? It's not what you think, Mama. No, you're not trying to run off with my money. Take her and give her food. Your uncle begged me. What am I supposed to do? I trust you. Everyone says she bad luck, but I think this is a smart girl. Maybe mama won't have to do everything by herself. You read books, you speak good like a white man, but is this who you want to be? I'm sorry, mama. No, no, I will put you out. And then it turns out that Sophie shares, I'm saving the money for an operation, and mama wants to know, what is this operation? And now I will go into the final section of the play. So if you've never read it, please take the time to, because it really is worth paying attention to it. Ultimately, the violence just spills over, and even this tavern and brothel that was sort of the one safe place in the village, as we've seen, it spills over there. Salima's husband, who had expelled her from the village after she was assaulted, he shows up. He demands to know where she's at, and they keep hiding her. But he and the government troops ultimately spill in, and as they make these demands, and it seems that there's just going to be violence that's going to spill over. Mama's going to be attacked. Sophie's going to be attacked. Everyone's going to be attacked. Salima comes out. And they notice that, and she starts bleeding, and they notice, and Mama screams, quick, go get some hot water and cloth. Salima, look at me. You have to look at me. Keep your eyes on me. Don't think of anything else. Look at me. And Salima looks at all of these men, and she says, you will not fight your battles on my body anymore. And then she collapses. And that happens just after Mama had given that big diamond to use, for another character to use, to get Sophie her operation, and then that character left with just the diamond. And so all of the women who have reached that juncture together, now all of those hopes are shattered, and Salima is the one who sort of has this last word of like, this what has happened to me will no longer happen to me, and there's almost this peace. And so we finally get this one last scene where Sophie's singing softly and Mama's there, and we now know that she too has experienced the same type of violence and trauma that Sophie has. And Christian, a character who had been there as sort of this traveling itinerant salesman who wouldn't drink, but gradually as the violence became more dangerous, he started drinking and is experiencing alcoholism again. He shows up, and he and Mama have this dance at the end as Sophie sings, as some of the other women who are there at the tavern sort of watch. And it's a strange coda, because it seemed that Salima very much had the last word, saying, you will not fight your battles on my body anymore. And yet, by giving this coda, Nottage, again, as I mentioned, gives that idea of hope, that these are characters who, after everything they've been through, after yet another disappointment for some, after a final, moment of death for another character, the survivors continue to have a measure of hope. They continue to seek a measure of agency within their own lives. And so to see Nottage, pull off that finale, I think it's just masterful. And so it's a wonderful play. I'd encourage folks to read it. In terms of other works I was reminded of, well, with Democratic Republic of the Congo, it's impossible to think about that without thinking of Patrice Lumumba and the great Lumumba Speaks, a book that can be tough to find, but check a university library. These are the collected speeches and writings of Lumumba. And then within that, of course, thinking about the writers from Africa and women who wrote in Africa, there is the great Bessie Head. I read Maru about a month and a half ago, but Head's A Question of Power is probably a novel that feels much closer to what Nottage is doing in Ruined. And this is a very intense book, but one that I think is very important. And then in terms of war and how that affects characters, possibly the finest book about war in Africa would be Petals of Blood by Ngugi wa Thiong'o, a Kenyan writer. The type of interiority that Nottage crafts is very different from that of Ariana Harwitz, but I think there are themes that are comparable across their works. And Die My Love, and I'm hoping Feeble Minded taps into many of those same themes. And then a book that focuses on a different period in African history and a more hopeful and collaborative period would be Claude McKay's Amiable with Big Teeth, about individuals, real life individuals during the Harlem Renaissance and other areas of the U.S. who had a little bit of wealth, who had a little bit of power, sort of supporting the Ethiopian resistance to European depredations in the 20th century. So this is a really interesting book for folks who would like to learn more about that. But let me know if you've read any of Nottage's other plays or if you've seen any performed. So hope everybody's doing well. Thanks.